You mentioned I was going to challenge Jake Paul or something like that.
Well, no, I'm just saying, you asked me, when did I retire? And I went, ooh, I don't even know if I did officially. I didn't sign nothing. Like, I'll fight Jake Paul tomorrow if they let me.
What do you Jason Mayhem Miller is here. Hello, folks. I'm Scott Johnson. Welcome to another episode. So glad you could be with us. And I wanted to bring this interview back, Mayhem Miller, because you probably haven't seen it on this channel. Mayhem Miller, who, let's back it up. You may remember from his MMA days or Bully Beatdown, which he used to host on MTV, then on to Joe Rogan. Now he does the news for Adam Corolla. He's had such an interesting life, but he's so good on camera. He's one of my favorite guys to sit down with. This was back during the LA wildfires. He was away from them. He's out here in Florida with us. So he came to sit down with me to talk a little about a great organization he's representing, MVP, Merging Vets in Players. They help veterans getting back into regular society. They help pro fighters getting back into regular society, because you don't quite understand what it's like, particularly on the fighter side, to go from living a life like Mike Tyson to going to the supermarket. It's a transition, so we talked to him a little about that. And we also talk about this. Let's widen out the shot if we could, because I mentioned Mike Tyson. He has some interesting thoughts on Tyson versus Jake Paul, that fight that drew a lot of, let's just say, eyeballs, a little bit of controversy and speculation when it happened. So he's got some interesting thoughts from a fighter's perspective. As you heard, he wants to fight Jake Paul. He also has some interesting thoughts on Floyd Mayweather. A little later on in the show, we're going to be joined. I was up back home last week. I was up in the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in the same area as Bryan Danielson, or Daniel Bryan, the famous pro wrestler, former WWE champion. Well, they have a wrestling organization up there. I bumped into someone with the organization. I said, hey, would you like to come on the show? They have a big event coming up in August. If you're up near Seattle and Portland, you might want to hear about it. So we'll have them on a little later on in the show to talk about the event they have going on. But let's start it now with the guy who's so fun to talk to. Here is the guy, Bully Beatdown, Adam Corolla show, done a lot with Joe Rogan, and so much more over the years. Here's Jason Mayhem Miller. Well, we're going to bring some mayhem on the show today. Jason Mayhem Miller. Sir, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me on Jacksonville's finest show. I'm telling you
Ringside, we appreciate it. Yeah. So you're here out of LA, is that right?
I am, man. I'm, dealing with the wildfire situation. God bless everybody out there. Yeah. And I'm happy to be ducking and diving and breathing fresh air over here in Jacksonville, but I'm gonna head back and be taking care of a lot of friends.
Is your home okay?
My home's okay.
Okay.
I have, by the will of God, my home's okay, but a lot of friends are not so lucky.
Yeah,
so,
I'm sure. Have you been in touch with a lot of people?
I have, yeah. I'm like, this phone is spazzing out right now. In my pocket, I can feel it.
Really? Okay. So talk to me about what brought you to our neck of the woods, out to Florida. MVP, what is it?
MVP is the Merging Vets and Players Association. What we do is we take guys who are former professional athletes, a lot of NFL alumni come to the program, and veterans who have gotten out of the service or even active duty. We have some guys that are active duty, and we try to help them make that transition from the life of a prize fighter, in my case, NFL player, or a service member, and try to transition to that civilian life in an easy way.
So explain that to me, because I've talked to people who are in that world. It's so different. You're traveling all over. You're just in this world that's almost its own subculture. What's it like to just get back into regular life?
But for me, it was a nightmare. For me, I went from the fight world to crime because I had no other way to really make it. I didn't have any structure in my life.
Let me back up. What do you mean? You went from...
I got a bar fight and did some time, but serious time.
Really?
And nothing would shake me out of this mindset until I found MVP. MVP got me to be human again, because when you're pushing yourself to the limit as a mixed martial artist, you have to be a beast, animal. It's part of the game. You have to be that. And it's so hard to find that balance where you're giving yourself the maximum effort and putting in as hard work as you do every day in the cage, in the regular world, without something spinning off and going crazy. What MVP did for me was give me a home base to talk about my feelings. You know, as a tough guy as the sport of mixed martial arts is and football is, there's a big gap in our world once you leave that career.
It reminds me of vets.
Yes,
Yeah.
veterans go through worse. Yeah. Like, you know, having buddies die or, you know, having to do what is necessary as a veteran. You know, my father went through that too, PTSD, the whole thing.
I want to clarify that. So when I think of vet, I can visualize in my mind coming back from a war and going to Walmart or something. Talk to me about what's that like for a
me,
fighter.
It was the grocery store. Like, this is my life now. I'm standing in front of Cocoa Puffs. No, like it's very like hard to like transition back. And like I said, for me, I fell into drinking and getting wild, doing crazy things because I didn't have this like community anymore. I just was like lost, kind of trying to find my way. And MVP like set me back on the right path where, okay, now I have somewhere to be every Wednesday. In LA, our chapter goes every Wednesday. Every Wednesday, I'm showing up, and there's somebody there who has a shared experience,
Yep.
has gone through tough stuff like I have, and it's okay to talk with them. And man, I'm so thankful. Yeah,
What's it like interacting with, like you mentioned the supermarket, the checker, and the woman asking for if you want to buy cookies?
Nightmare, yeah.
It
no,
is?
yeah, well, it's just weird. Like, okay, when you're on top of the world in a fight sense, like there's this weird, bizarre thing. You got everybody doing everything for you kind of thing. And then once that settles down and like you transition out of that, there's a big gap. It feels like lonely and like everything is like quieter.
Really?
And yeah, and it's tough. It's tough. I don't know. I think a lot of guys can transition fine. Some guys can. I couldn't. A lot of service members go through really tough things, and it takes more, you know, for lack of a better term, therapy. You know, I think that our society, American culture, is missing this thing where it's okay to get in a group of people and vent. And just, even if you don't want any feedback, just talk about how you feel and talk about what's going on in your life, because sometimes you figure out the answer on your own.
I want to ask you about other things in your life. Beyond that, what is going on in your life back in LA? You're involved with Adam Corolla now.
I do the Adam Corolla show every day. He hired me as the newsman. You know, that was one of those things that could only come because I probably was an MVP. Because in MVP, I got back to normal, and I got, like I said, there's a lot of talking involved, and I was chatterboxing with everybody and getting used to, you know, verbalizing what I feel and what I think. And I went on Adam Corolla's show because we're, you know, from my fight days, we're old buddies. You know, he had me on Loveline way back in the day.
Loveline? That is a ways back.
Loveline. So like that's how long I was fighting. I was fighting way back then.
Yeah.
And, you know, he had me on to talk about what's been going on with me. And that evolved into, hey, you know what? Come do the news. And I did the news. And so now
as a guy who's done the news for 30 years,
right?
You don't fit the typical standard.
As a fellow newsman,
yeah, as a fellow
appreciate
newsman,
you.
Yeah. So do you enjoy it?
I do. Well, you know, it's not as much serious business like you where we're just reporting just the facts, ma'am, just the facts.
I get it.
We crack wise. You know, give a little intro, outro. It's a podcast, baby. It's the original podcast, I believe.
I got to ask you about, it is the original. I got to interrupt you because something you said before we went on, you mentioned I was going to challenge Jake Paul or something like that.
Well, no, I'm just saying, you asked me, when did I retire? And I went, ooh, I don't even know if I did officially. I didn't sign nothing. Like, I'll fight Jake Paul tomorrow if they let me.
What are your thoughts on what's happened with that?
I think it's brilliant. You know, I would have done the same thing if our internet connection speeds were fast enough to justify YouTube back then. You know, I was on that same wavelength, but with MySpace. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like a different time where, you know, you promote yourself through regular channels. I would be on the radio or I'd be on TV. Nowadays, it's brilliant. You know, you say what you want about Jake Paul, but he definitely figured out how to be a fight promoter and a fighter at the same time. And, you know, he's living the dream.
I'm going to ask it. I know it's not PC. Was it rigged? Was it rigged?
Rigged.
Everyone talks.
Rigged. Look, here's what I said.
Was like this.
I was like the first guy to go, ooh, man, Mike Tyson might get killed. And everyone was like, what? Mayhem is insane and an idiot. But then slowly people were like, oh, yeah, Mike Tyson is like, didn't we watch him when Mr. T was on TV? Yeah, we did.
Yes.
So that was like back in the day. I was like, guys, 27-year-old Mayhem would smash 44-year-old Mayhem. I guarantee you. Like, that's just how Father Time works. And
do you think Mike would have destroyed him in his prime?
Oh,
quicker?
my God. Ripped his head off, maybe punched it into the 15th row. Yeah, Mike Tyson, look, I like that Mike got in there. He's a true warrior. He's a damn, you can't take nothing from Mike. Mike is a serious fighter and has been the whole time. Jake Paul, not quite the level of fighter as a prime Mike Tyson, but a clever guy. Clever guy. But half of boxing is promotion. Floyd Mayweather, we refer to him as the greatest of all time, but we forget that he did some footwork outside the ring too to avoid guys at the right time, just to make sure his legacy was intact 50-0.
Did MMA, I mean, obviously what happened with Tyson, Paul's big. Did MMA kind of destroy boxing?
I wouldn't say destroyed it, but it gave an outlet for the bloodlust that us Americans naturally have.
Yeah.
You know, we love fights. Like, you know, the hockey game will stop so that we can watch this fight. You know, there's something that's beautiful about fighting that we all appreciate, and mixed martial arts has distilled it down into exactly what we want. Like, we want a gentleman's street fight. We want a street fight with some rules. But I think that what it did was give a different outlet. Now, boxing is its own thing. It's to be respected. The rules are much different, and it's beautiful to watch. But, you know, kickboxing with wrestling, with jiu-jitsu, like, that gives like a more, there's something for everybody in that.
One guy we've had on the show a lot has been Ken Shamrock. Back in the
Great,
day, old
legendary
school guy.
guy.
Legendary
We love him,
guy.
yeah.
And he was talking to me about there's been a lot of differences with gloves, bare knuckle. Is that a big thing kind of in the industry?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I'll just be honest with you. I've been in that cage. They put a brick on your hand. Like, it's you know, you got a hand wrap, and it's dangerous business. With bare knuckle fighting, you got to be safe with those punches. You gotta, you know, it's a very brutal sport. The cuts are really nasty looking, but yeah, it makes it so that the punches are a little, yeah, you gotta pick your shots.
And before we go, what are your thoughts on John Jones? Best in the world?
I mean, obviously, John Jones has proven himself time and time again at 205. As a heavyweight, he beat an older Stipe, okay, and he beat Cyril Gane, who's I think he's a white belt at jiu-jitsu. I really don't think he knows any grappling that much. He's a fantastic kickboxer, one of the best kickboxers of all time. But as a heavyweight, John Jones has some things to prove, I think. The big test, I think, if Tom Aspinall fights John Jones, this will be an unlocking. Oh, he is a true heavy. If he can get past Tom Aspinall, okay, I think he's cemented his legacy as this era's heavyweight of all time.
And before we go, how do people find MVP if they're interested?
I think it's emergentfitsandplayers.com.
So they just look it up, they'll find it, yeah.
Yeah, just look it up. They have a great Instagram that follows all the guys. It's a fantastic program. If you're a veteran or if you're a former professional athlete, please come to the gym and check us out.
Jason Mayhem Miller, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It was an absolute pleasure.
God bless you, sir.
One thing I don't like about that Mayhem interview is he told me he's come back to Florida here in the next few months and wants to train me in MMA. I tried to explain to him, A, I wouldn't do well. B, I'm pushing 50, so like I'm not the typical trainee. But we'll see what happens when Mayhem, when he gets back to town, we'll meet up with him again. But I gotta move on here. So You probably recognize that guy, Bryan Danielson, Daniel Bryan in WWE, former champion. Well, he and I grew up in the same area. We went to actually the rival high schools. And I was up in my hometown here in the last few weeks, and I ran into some folks with Rogue Wrestling Attractions up in the Pacific Northwest, because Daniel always brags he's from Aberdeen, Washington. Every time you see him come down to the ring, it's a small town about a couple hours out of Seattle. So they got a wrestling organization out there called Rogue Wrestling Attractions. Bumped into one of their guys when I was out there, and I said, hey, would you like to come on the show? So, because they have a big event coming up in the Pacific Northwest on August 23rd. If you have anyone you know out in the Pacific Northwest or you're listening to this, check it out. They are emerging indie wrestling promotion out there, and we always like to put them on when we can. So let's get to it. Here's Rogue Wrestling Attractions based out of Aberdeen, Washington, with some details on a big event they have coming August 23rd. Well, we're excited to be joined right now by Ken Huffman with Rogue Wrestling Attractions based out of Grace Harbor in Washington State, where I'm from. So if you're watching, you're like, that seems pretty far away from me. That's why we're up there. But if you're in the Pacific Northwest watching this, check this out. Ken, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Scott.
Well, Ken, tell me about Rogue Wrestling Attractions based out of Grace Harbor, which is kind of west of Olympia, the state's capital. Tell me all about it.
So Rogue Wrestling Attractions, we're based out of Aberdeen, Washington, which is about an hour west of Olympia.
Time out. The home of Bryan Danielson, a.k.a. Daniel Bryan. I don't want to overlook that. Go ahead.
That it is. But currently our Aberdeen native wrestling out of Aberdeen, his first time in Aberdeen, on his birthday will be Big Nasty Logan.
Okay. So you have August 23rd at the historical seaport in your county there, Grace Harbor. You have the Seaport Slam Fest. Tell me all about it.
Yes, RWA presents Seaport Slam Fest at the Grace Harbor Historical Seaport in Aberdeen, Washington. It'll be our first festival-style event. It's outdoors. We're going to have 2 stages set up for a battle of the bands from noon to 7, and then from 8 o'clock to 10:30, we're doing all professional wrestling. We have 4 matches lined up. We have our champion versus champion match with Luis De La Morte, the Harbor Havoc champion, taking on Pretty Boy Troy Prescott, the Cascade Chaos champion. We have Christopher Rysek taking on Mario De Federici, one man looking to keep his career and one man looking to rise back to the top. 5-man fatal 5-way for the Cascade Chaos #1 contender match with Michael Antonucci taking on TNT Tyson Lee, taking on Creed and Hollow, taking on the Rat King, taking on Petrov.
Tell me about the dynamic of indie wrestling shows, because so many people watch wrestling on TV and it's larger than life, it's huge, but there's a distance between you and the ring. You don't get up close with the people. I'm assuming at your show you get a lot more up close.
Well, we follow the Washington State DOL rules as closely as possible. So we have a 6-foot safety zone between the ring and the first row of the crowd where we put our VIP seats at. There's about 6 feet between the ring and the
But
front.
6 feet is a lot closer than 500.
Exactly. And especially if they get outside the ring, they're right in your face, right at your table. And
a lot
they got to
happens.
get back in the ring.
To the people in your area who might want to buy a ticket and go out, what do they need to know? Where do they go?
They need to go to rogueattractions.com, go to Seaport Slam Fest event. They read all about it, everything that's happening. Tickets are $15 for children 16 and under. They're $30 for adults, and they are $60 for ringside VIP seats.
And talk to me about your guys' growth. You said you were in Spokane, which for you is the other side of the state.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are growing. It's only been 3.5 years.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. 12 shows in Ocean Shores and 2 shows in Spokane. The goal was if we can do it all the way on the other side of the state and on this side of the state, we could have two battling shows under the same brand. And it was a huge task that we're going to reevaluate and move back over there, but we're doing right here in Aberdeen for this show.
Well, Ken Huffman with the Seaport Slam Fest, Rogue Wrestling Attractions. One more time, which website people go to if they want more information?
They can go to rogueattractions.com.
Ken, thank you for joining us on the show today.
And Scott, thank you very much.
So good luck to Ken and Rogue Wrestling Attractions out there in the Pacific Northwest. And as far as Mayhem goes, so as I said, he's likely back in Florida in coming months, wants to teach me to fight. I may duck him. We'll see what happens if Mayhem comes back to town, because I told him I'm all for it at the time, but I was kind of running on adrenaline when I was agreeable. So we'll see what happens. But thank you for joining us for this episode of Going Ringside. I'm Scott Johnson. We, of course, will see you back here next time.